أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Before starting the session, may I request Professor Datu Ahmad Musa, are we allowed to initiate the session?
Yes, please.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A very good evening to all respected scholars, esteemed patrons, advisory members, colleagues, students, and distinguished participants for joining us from different parts of the world. So on behalf of Homa Civilizational Dialogue and Harmony Foundation, it's my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to today's online lecture on In Civilizational Dialogue, where history stands today. This session will be presided over by our Datu, Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa. As a distinguished scholar and a public intellectual from Malaysia, with his kind permission, we are proceeding the session, alhamdulillah, now. So in this session, we are honored to have an esteemed panel of scholars and intellectuals. Our distinguished speakers and panelists today include the keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Ratan Hangloo, President HCDHF Professor Hamidullah Marazi, and Director and Founder of Islamic Renaissance Front, Malaysia, Datu Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa. So may I now respectfully invite Professor Hamidullah Marazi, our President, to deliver his welcoming address. Professor Marazi Sahab, you are welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, I welcome all the dignitaries who have joined us today, especially Professor Ahmed Farooq Musa, Professor Ratan Hangloo ji, Brother Waqar Ahmed, and all the dignitaries who have joined us. I just want to give some introduction of our Homa Civilizational Dialogue and Harmony Foundation before saying something more. Homa Civilizational Dialogue and Harmony Foundation is a non-profit organization registered under Section 8 of the Companies Act and headquartered in the Kashmir Valley of India. The foundation is dedicated to advancing inter-civilizational, intercultural, and inter-religious dialogue in a contemporary world increasingly shaped by diversity, polarization, and conflict. HCDHF is founded on the conviction that sustainable peace, social harmony, and human flourishing can only emerge through sincere dialogue, ethical engagement, intellectual openness, and mutual respect among cultures.
We wish you all the best and very good evening to all the participants. First of all, because they are our strength. Then to my esteemed friend, Professor Hamidullah Marazi Sahab, very good evening. Mr. Farid, who is moderating this, and our chief guest, and the person who presides over is Professor Musa ji. Let me once again welcome you all on my behalf also to this lecture on civilization dialogue. I must also acknowledge at the very outset Professor Rauf Sahab, Rauf Ahmed Shah, if he is around there, because he was the one who also, along with Professor Marazi and many of us, laid the foundation for this dialogue in the beginning, in fact. You see, I would divide this lecture into three parts when we talk of civilization dialogue, and where history stands today. I would divide it into three parts. Three parts in this sense that when we first of all say civilizational dialogue, what is civilizational dialogue? And why civilizational dialogue? We find that civilizational dialogue basically refers to a sustained, reflective, and ethical engagement, between different civilizations that have existed from, say, antiquity, I would say, or cultural formations, we can also say, which is aimed at mutual understanding, coexistence, which is disappearing now, learning and transformation rather than domination and assimilation. If you look at the present circumstances, you will feel that there is a basically only domination. One power wants to dominate, assimilate, incorporate, like colonialism or imperialistic tendencies, but there is no dialogue, there is no discussion, there is no transformative, change taking place. So therefore, at its core, we find that it treats civilization not as a kind of closed competing blocks, but it historically entangles, it internally remains diverse and capable of conversation across time, space, and power asymmetrics. That's what is civilizational dialogue about. It's a dialogue between worldviews, not just between states or between one elite group and another elite group, say Indian elite group, American elite group, Indian elite group or Iranian elite group and others. It is basically between worldviews. Suppose, for example, we are talking of environment. We are not talking of environment should be clean in India or US or Iran or anywhere. We want environment universally to be better, so that everybody benefits. That's a kind of civilizational dialogue when, that is the item of civilization dialogue, not civilization dialogue itself. Likewise. So the key aspects of any civilizational dialogue are recognition of plurality. First of all, because if my civilization, Indian civilization, wants to talk to Arab civilization, if it wants to talk to Persian civilization, if it wants to talk to Western civilization, then we should first of all have faith in plurality. Plurality, that's a rare commodity today. Tolerating plurality, I would say. So plurality is one of an important item that has to be recognized if we talk of civilizational dialogue. We have civilizations, they should not be considered, the civilizations themselves should not consider as monoliths. Each one contains internal debates, class conflicts, religious schisms, philosophical disagreements. If we talk of within India, within Western, within Arab, within any other civilization, internally we have so many problems, we have so many debates. We have the question of human rights going on, we have an environmental problem, we have population problem, we have caste conflicts, we have communal conflicts. That's a different thing. That does not stop us from indulging into a civilizational dialogue with any other country. You see, because each contains these internal debates, class conflicts, religious schisms, as I said. But dialogue acknowledges voices within a civilization, not a single authentic essence. Different voices, it certainly takes forward those many voices. And this directly challenges the clash of civilizations, what Huntington has said. We'll come to that afterwards. There is, in every civilizational dialogue, we find that there's a concept of historical consciousness. What is that historical consciousness which we want to connect or attach or associate with the civilizational dialogue? We find that civilizational dialogue is grounded in history. We can't talk in abstract terms that civilizational dialogue is there. It is well grounded in historical circumstance. It has an empirical base. Because when we are talking of environment, for example, when we are talking of plurality, we are taking territoriality into consideration. We are taking into consideration the public good. Public good is being taken into consideration. The country's other aspects and benefits which universally would benefit others also are taken into consideration. It recognizes past encounters, trade, translation, movements, conquests, colonialism, resistance. It takes all these things into consideration. We also find that it admits asymmetries of power, colonial violence, for example, epistemic suppression, for example, or economic exploitation. You see, when we are dealing with the Western civilization, we are not forgetting the fact that they have been exploiting us when we were their colonial subjects. But that at the same time does not stop us from, indulging into this dialogue for future or even at this point of time. Even at that point of time, if you look at the question of Renaissance in India, you find at that point of time also there was a civilizational dialogue. When they were exploiting us, oppressing us, At that point also there was a civilizational dialogue. So civilizational dialogue cannot stop people from interacting even if one has exploited the other in the past or past history. Second is that there should be in civilizational dialogue epistemic humility. What do we mean by epistemic humility? No civilization possesses total knowledge or universal reason. We cannot, as we say sometimes wrongly, that, everything was born in Ayurveda, everything was born in, ancient India only, and therefore there was nothing in the world. That's not true. If we are in a civilizational dialogue and if we have that girth and, strength of civilization, then first of all, we shall have to accept that we alone do not possess total knowledge, or we are not the custodians of the universal knowledge. Every country has its knowledge base. Every country has, its own specificities in knowledge. And every country has knowledge of, we may have knowledge about Ayurveda, but somebody has knowledge about Hikmah. We may have knowledge about religion, but somebody has knowledge about ethics. I would like to mention here, in fact, when we say universal, for example, we have in 2nd century BC, we find that during 2nd century BC, when Europe got organized, Constantine, what he did, he asked his deputy to go to India and fetch him a medicine for leprosy, acknowledging that India has a medicine for leprosy and India has the knowledge of Ayurveda, at that point of time. Or, for example, Arab world and the Roman world depended on spices for India 200 BC. Can you imagine? We have Warmington's book giving us details about it, immense amount of material on this, that from 200 BC, we have been, sort of in a civilizational dialogue, I would say. Or, for example, Indians learning metallurgy from Iran around 300, 400 BC. So therefore, we find that each civilization does have a knowledge, because knowledge is not the whole. Universal knowledge is not only with one civilization or with one country. Secondly, we also find that each tradition has partial truths, which are shaped by geography, ecology, and social organization. Partial truths in the sense, I would go back to prior to the age of reason, for example. You remember Leopold von Ranke, a historiographer from Western Europe, probably from France. He gave a theory when the growth of historical knowledge was taking place and people were looking for reason, people were looking for empirical basis and facts for knowledge. He gave a theory because he was too much ecclesiastically, sort of painted. And he gave this kind of a concept. He said that if it is raining at that point of time in France and Europe, everywhere it is raining. That was the base of knowledge for him, for example. Rankian philosophy goes around that only. He would generalize on the basis of whole world. But that is not civilizational dialogue, because we must leave a scope and we must accept the question of plurality, and also that no country has totality of knowledge. We also find that this dialogue involves listening to each other. One civilization listening to other civilization, not merely exporting one's categories as universal. We have nationalism as a category which is imported into India. It's an imported category and it doesn't fit into our concept of nation. I always say that we are not a nation. I need not be hanged for that, but we are a civilizational nation. Different concept altogether. So therefore, this crucial philosophy, theology, science, and ethics are very, very important aspects of any civilizational dialogue. We have also translation rather than conversion. You see, knowledge can be translated. We must remember, knowledge is not knowledge unless we share it. It becomes knowledge only when we share it. And it becomes knowledge only when knowledge helps us transformation of society, transformation of technology. So therefore, we find that translation mechanism is very, very necessary in any civilizational dialogue. Because how do I understand your problems? How would you understand my problems? We use English as language, for example, your language may be Malaysian, your language may be Arabic, your language may be Hindi, your language may be Urdu, but suppose my language may be different altogether. It may be French, it may be something else, or a Kashmiri, for example. How do we understand each other? Therefore, translation is also one of the important aspects in any civilizational dialogue. Concepts are translated across cultural, linguistic worlds. For example, haq in Arabic, dharma in Hindu concept. You can imagine. I will give a very interesting evidence here. We have in Kashmir, we talk a lot of mysticism and many other things, Sufism and Paramarth. Our Pandit Baradari talks of Paramarth, and our Muslim brothers talk of mysticism, which is one and the same thing. It's not different and all that. But go back to its roots. Can you imagine when Shaivite philosophers were debating all this? Al-Haj Mansur came from Baghdad at Shankar Varman's time to Kashmir and met Shaivites, and he was discussing with them, what is that you are preaching here? What is the basis of your religion? What is the basis of mystic, atmosphere in Kashmir? At that point of time, he was debating mysticism and so on. What is the kind of language an Arab at that point of time must have used? Means obviously he must have had somebody with him who understood his language and who also understood the language Sanskrit of those Shaivites at that point of time. I'm giving a single example. There can be plentiful of examples we can give. The other important aspect of civilizational dialogue is ethical reciprocity. Ethical reciprocity in the sense that we must have respect for human dignity across continents, across civilizations. We should not have a coercion kind of a feeling. We should have reciprocity. We should have ethics in that. And then both the civilizations or multiple civilizations who are participating in dialogue, they should have willingness to be transformed by encounter. When I go to Arab world, for example, I should remember that I should be in a position to accept what they feel is truth. Because I will also tell them my truth, they will tell me their truth. Though unfortunately, truth is now disappearing in the world because there is post-truth, there is alternate truth. There are 100 lies when you tell, and that also becomes a truth nowadays. The other important aspect we find is engagement across multiple levels, for example. We should have engagement across multiple levels. The civilization dialogue is not only elite or diplomatic. Its civilization dialogue cannot be carried forward or carried out by only foreign ministers of two countries. That cannot happen. That's a dialogue simply, but not civilizational dialogue, I would say. Even not dialogue, in fact. It operates at philosophical and theological levels, ideas, metaphysics, ethics, cultural levels like art, language, ritual, memory, history, social and political levels like law, governance, coexistence, everyday practices like food, medicine, ecology. Look at the countries dependent on India for medicine, look at the Indians dependent on for various other things, on different civilizations, for example, on different knowledge basis, invest in our world, in other countries also. Then a civilizational dialogue has also to be dynamic. It is not a static, because changes are taking place and civilizations are processes because they are growing, they are changing, they are transcending to new, areas, new levels, new stratifications, new knowledge bases, and therefore they are not fossils. Like Europeans came, they said, the Indian civilization is completely sort of a hated kind of institution. Everything was interpreted by colonial masters as if everything was wrong here, treating us like a fossil at that point of time, Warren Hastings' time. But we are not, no civilization is a fossil. Every civilization keeps on changing, and then there should be, above all, I would say, a critical self-reflection, a critical reflection of in the civilization itself. That is, true dialogue is reflexive. That true dialogue remains reflexive, that each civilization interrogates its own exclusions, its own hierarchies, its own silences. Suppose, for example, we would say we would enter into a civilizational dialogue with a particular country. But from time to time, on the basis of their responses, on the basis of our own versions, we must also interrogate whether there's anything wrong with our civilizational dialogue, whether our civilizational dialogue is incompatible with the dialogue or with other countries' civilization and so on. What is missing in us? What is missing in them? So therefore, these aspects also have to be taken into consideration. It allows, say, for example, internal critique, which is inspired by external, encounters. Internal critique, and that's a very, very beneficial. This is where dialogue becomes transformative rather than decorative. I would give a small example here. My Kashmiri brethren would really be happy to know. For example, we had a Ghani Kashmiri, one of the very important Persian poets in Kashmir, and when he assumed great significance and importance and picked up the art of poetry, Persian poetry, the Iranians did not hate him because he had learned Persian poetry par excellence. What happened? The Iranians, the Persian civilization, they gave him the greatest honor of their country, even though Ghani was a Kashmiri. That is the resilience, that is the atmosphere plural, that is the understanding between those civilizations at that point of time. So likewise, the different civilizations have to be compatible to each other. Then we find that there is another definition of civilization dialogue is little more compact, because we are transcending different levels of periodization also. So civilizational dialogue is historically grounded, ethically reciprocal, epistemically humble, but engaging engagement among diverse cultural civilizations, traditions that seek mutual understanding, translation of meaning, critical self-reflection without erasing difference or reproducing domination. I would here emphasize the point that civilization dialogue does not mean that we condense or we eliminate difference of opinion. We may have difference of opinion with the West. We may have difference of opinion with the Arab world. We may have difference of opinion with the Central Asian civilizations, or Chinese civilizations. The difference of opinion does not necessarily mean that we cannot indulge into dialogue. Difference of opinion is at one point of one level, but at the same time, at another level, the civilizational dialogue can always go. Difference of opinion would always remain there. Because the other starting point is that there is no civilization in isolation. You see, always I would emphasize, I am reading more about these ancient, things sometimes to clear my mind. And I would say when today we talk in terms of technology, and we feel that, because of technology, we are able to be mobile to different countries, go to different places, and it increases our social mobility, our other things and so on. But if you look at the ancient times, immensity of distances never stopped civilizations from interacting. As I was giving you the example of, Al-Hajj Mansoor coming from Arab world at that point of time to Kashmir. The Persians coming from interior of Central Asia, Kumar Jiva coming from Khotan to Kashmir to learn Sanskrit, for example. So therefore, immensity of distances has never been a problem, nor a language has been a problem at that point of time. A civilizational dialogue, rejects the idea that Indian, Islamic and Western civilization developed separately. When we are rooting the civilizational dialogue, we must first of all consider that none of the civilization has developed in isolation. They have developed by dint of interaction. You can all know, for example, the Arab world contributing so much to history of medicine, contributing so much to mathematics, Indians contributing to mathematics, Chinese also contributing to history of science and technology. In 16th century, India got paper for the first time during Abul Fazl's time, Akbar's time. And that was possible because we had a good going of trade with China. We got Chinese silk in early BCs much earlier. When Nilmata Purana was written, even that time, Nila is referred to have worn silken clothes, for example. So no civilization operates in isolation, and these points of contact have been, right from beginning there, and nobody can develop separately. All civilizations have developed by interacting with various other civilizations. In a state, it begins with three factors. They evolved through contact, all civilizations. We are concentrating here on Arab, Western, for example, or Indian. Their encounters involve translation. Look at the medieval chronicles when, right from Iltutmish or Qutbuddin Aibak's time, we find that when they came to India, Sanskrit documents were translated to understand things. Abul Fazl Akbar's time, there was a department for translation almost, to translate these things and so on. And also power relations. The best example is colonialism. The different empires, or in contemporary times, I would say imperialism and capitalism, which structures the terms of dialogue. It structures the terms of dialogue, What are the different aspects that are being picked up, for example? Even they also, when colonialism also came, Warren Hastings put up Asiatic Society and Translation Department, to translate all those scriptures in India to understand Indian civilization better. But they had, of course, a motive that how to control Indians better. The coercive element was there, so therefore it cannot be a civilizational dialogue. It was only understanding India. So the question is not whether they interacted, but how the dialogue was framed and by whom the dialogue was framed. We have India and Islamic civilization, dialogic hybridity, where knowledge and philosophy operates. We have Indian mathematics, astronomy, medicine entering the Islamic world and bringing numerals and various other medicines from the knowledge of medicines from there, which were reworked. We find the Arab civilization borrowing from Indians and reworking, Indians borrowing from them and reworking, for example. Ibn Rushd, the greatest, knowledgeable person in the Arab world, Ibn Khaldun's brother, who knew about history of medicine and so on. Islamic philosophy, for example, Falsafa, Sufism, interacted with the Indian metaphysics, especially non-dual and Bhakti traditions. We also have Sufi concepts of Wahdatul Wujud, which resound with Indian monastic and devotional idioms, for example. Without becoming identical, yet Sufism maintains its own identity, Bhakti has its own identity, Wahdatul Wujud has its own identity, Dvaitavad and Advaitavad, dualism and idealistic monism or non-dualism, they have their own, these concepts have their own identity, but yet they participated, they interacted, they understood and borrowed from each other. So therefore, dialogue can be worked through translation, reinterpretation, but not synthesis. We also have to be very careful. When I am saying borrowing, we are not synthesizing. We are borrowing to understand things, but not synthesizing. We have religion and, practice, for example. Let me give you an example. Bhakti and Sufism developed parallel ethics. Love, surrender, interiority, saints, shrines, poetry became shared cultural spaces between the two. This was a subaltern dialogue, often outside state and orthodox control. We have mystics who did not take patronization. I mean, if you look at Sufism, we have ulama-i dunya, ulama-i akhrat, ulama-i su. Except ulama-i, dunya and su, you find even the strongest was ulama-i akhrat, real mystic Sufis. We find them when you compare them, they are also preaching the same elements almost, which the Bhakti saints like Kabir are preaching. And if you look at the audience of both, who are their audience? Their audience are common people, where state has nothing to do. The state is not patronizing these ones who are indulging in this dialogue with people, in fact, across civilizations. You see, Shams Tabrizi is talking at one place of time, but he's very popular in India. Kabir talking here, but he was popular in other places. Buddha preaching here, Buddhism spreading in Central Asia also. Likewise, we find that these people are, they have indulged in this kind of dialogue. And we also find that it's outside the control of the state. This dialogue is not patronization of state. This is not patronized by state at all. State can at the most facilitate. We have power asymmetries like Sultanates in India, Mughals in India, who shaped the encounter. They also introduce a dialogue of coexistence with violence, exclusion of violence, and hierarchy. And it also holds together exchange and domination. It holds the exchange and domination also dialogue can influence. We find that the civilizational dialogue is sometimes or goes sometimes messy, unequal and creative. It's always creative, but it can go messy also and unequal also sometimes. Look at the Western civilization and Islamic civilization. There's a dialogue between the two, but it goes into rupture if you look at the Crusades. You see, for example, Greek philosophy reaches Europe via Arabic translations, which they forget. We also find Islamic science preserved, expanded, and systematized classical knowledge. They may not acknowledge it today. Westerners may not acknowledge it, but it did happen. This phase shows asymmetrical recognition, Europe benefiting, but later erasing the mediators, not acknowledging them, not acknowledging them at that point of time. Then modern rupture, when you look at modern rupture in a civilizational dialogue, you find colonial modernity. For example, if you look at 18th century onwards, dialogue collapsed because it changed it into domination of colonial masters. You see, when colonial masters came, they did not understand Indian system, but they imposed us colonialism. They imposed their modernity. As a result of their modernity, what happened in 18th century? The Muslims got divided. The ones who became modernists with English education and the ones who continued to remain, conservative as they were defined by colonial masters. So this happened because the dialogue was sort of hijacked by one group, one country, one civilization, and treated as a weapon. It became it became subordinate to Western civilization, and they controlled it. And Islamic civilization was recast from those days onwards. It was recast. The word conservative, traditional, stagnant, irrational. The concepts that they are exploiting even today to raise the tensions between civilizations. You have seen what happened in Palestine, what's happening in Iran today. I mean, why should somebody come thousands of kilometers to civilize us? We have lived for thousands of years, great Persian Empire, great Indian Empire, great Indian or Arab and others. But you find that because of this domination, they want to recast the whole thing. Then contemporary attempts which are taking place at dialogue, India and outside. We find various interfaith forums becoming very active and global ethical initiatives being taken up. Without addressing the imperial history. That is one of the worst things. They remain superficial. They are not, we may talk about that America has contributed significantly to science, technology, to world order, to this, to that. But we also need to take into consideration what is happening. Is it an imperialistic tendency or they have done it for the sake of philanthropy? Dialogue is if we do it for the sake of philanthropy, because we let other civilization also to flower, to grow, to prosper, to develop, to acquire knowledge. That is dialogue. Dialogue is not that we impose and say, since we are the masters of the world, you have no right to be in A category or in B category. You have right to be only the category that we impose on you. That's not a dialogue. You see, civilizational dialogue demands acknowledgement of colonial extraction. In the sense, we accept a colonial master's exploitation, but we also accept the residue of colonialism if something better happened during that period of time. We cannot erase that from our history. Railways must have been brought into India only to take Indian goods outside the country. But we cannot say that we did not benefit from that, though that's not part of civilizational dialogue. Recognition of Islamic intellectual modernities. Top Islamic scholars, in fact, even if the West says conservative, traditional, but they have talked about the concepts of modernity long ago. They have brought in the concepts of modernity from time to time. It's not that Islam is a fossil or static or like that. No, it's an invitation to peace. It has always transformed societies. It has developed so much. I mean, you visit the, say, Arab countries, for example, from Dubai onwards and go to Arab world and other, you find it's all modern. It's not traditional. But yet, we cannot erase it from our mind because our mindset is of domination, not of dialogue. You see, when India encountered the West, for example, in, say, mid-17th century, India encountered them as a colony. We did not encounter them because they had come for a dialogue. We encountered them because they had come colonial masters, not equals. In dialogue, we have to leave that space for when we say dialogue can take place because plurality has to be recognized, as I said at the very outset. Therefore, you have to treat the other also equal. You know, it's something like that. You respect me, I respect you. We may have difference of opinion. Our basis of dialogue may be different. Our topics of dialogue may be different. Our dialogue may be on different connotations. But that necessarily does not mean that we dominate and we become unequal, that we treat particular civilization as subordinate and ourselves as most modern. Western knowledge systems, for example, they were institutionalized and Indian systems were devalued. You know, that this civilization is static, it is not developing, it is not growing. That was the concept of, that was the version of the West when India was taken over by colonial masters. Because dialogue was replaced instead by classification, codification. You know, many of the communities in India, tribal communities particularly, and others also, for example, if you look at caste system was not as rigorous in India. It's a post-colonial version that too much of it was added to it. And codification in the sense that many of groups in India, you know, they, like Yerakulas, for example, I'm staying in Hyderabad, this example comes handy, in Andhra, and many other, you know, regions also, including Northeast. These tribes were defined as criminals, outcast, outlaw. They were characterized, and their histories were written like that they are completely outlaw, they are criminal. And this codification was done by the British and it became sacrosanct with them. And also control. Indian traditions, we find that Indian traditions survived by translation into Western categories, often distorted. You see, Indian traditions are translated, but if you look at Westerners, they are completely distorted. Look at, for example, I'll give you the concept of here, the best concept would be periodization.
Many thanks. Sorry to interrupt. Many thanks for your thoughtful reflections. Sorry, Prof. Actually, we are having some time limitations and we are having the constraint of time. So you are requested to conclude in a couple of minutes. That would be most kind of you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. What we find, in fact, you know, when we talk in terms of where history stands today, we find that civilizations presently, in terms of today, they speak through conflict and not through cooperation. You know, be it Western civilization or Persian civilization, be it Arab civilization or Western civilization, or Semitic or Indian or say Pakistani and others. We have the history stands at crossroads because we speak through conflict more and less through cooperation. Because dialogue must include memory of violence in the sense that how violence has impacted history of regions, history of civilization earlier. Therefore, if we use that memory that in future the violence should not take place, therefore, and insert that into our dialogue, it would transform into an understanding between the nations, between civilization, because that understanding requires translation of this memory. We also find that no civilization emerges morally or intellectually innocent. That we would say, no, I did this because I did not know about your country. That cannot happen in dialogue, and that cannot happen in history. And we also find, that civilizations are, as per the latest history, including the perceptions and perspectives given by Huntington, we find that civilizations are fixed. They are homogeneous. They are bounded. There are cultural differences very deep. They are permanent, irreconcilable. Conflict is natural and inevitable. Identity is civilizational before political and economic. Now imagine, when we interpret civilizational characteristics like that irreconcilable, for example, are cultural differences and they are deep, they cannot be reconciled, then we are giving birth only, we are promoting and patronizing conflict, not dialogue between the civilizations and so on. Civilizations are basically historically fluid. We also find that they are internally diverse. Like others tell us that Indian civilization, but when we look within India, look at the diversity that we have. We are proud of our diversity, but there is a diversity. There's a religious diversity, there's a cultural diversity, there's a regional diversity, there's spatial diversity, there's geographical diversity. When my friends are shivering in snow in Kashmir, Himachal and upper reaches of UP, I'm enjoying here in Hyderabad with a different kind of environment. Is not it diverse geographically? Likewise. So therefore, these diversities have to be taken into consideration. They do not necessarily, make the diversity within the civilization does not make it worse, that makes it better. And therefore, identity is also shaped in these by material conditions, power, and exchange. If we look at that also, therefore, civilizations would be capable of conversation amidst all these conflicts. They can be capable, irrespective of this fact, because they should treat history as a sequence of civilizational confrontations. There has been not only a confrontation, there has been a cooperation, between one civilization and another. And confrontation changes into, when we understand each other, it changes into cooperation also. Look at the invaders who came to India, for example. Many of them ended as Indian rulers and worked for the welfare of India also. We need not forget that. Akbar's Deen Ilahi, for example. Akbar's, survey of agrarian land from Bengal to Kashmir to other regions and so on. Even if he would not have that, he would have looted and gone back. But look at it. These things need to be shared, and we also need to share intellectual spaces. Imperial and colonial violence needs to be accepted, but that acceptance should not lead to contradiction. That should lead further dialogue. We must emphasize the question of epistemic plurality, the question of existence of different knowledge systems, and also own reason, ethics, and modernity. Our modernity may be different. Our modernity does not tell us that a particular class of gender should go completely naked in a underwear and move around, and that is our civilization and modernity. No. Our modernity may be covered. Our modernity may be respected. It may be the modernity in the West, but it may not be modern here. So therefore, modernity does also have different variations, regional, country level, or civilizational. So let me stop here only. I thank all of you, the audience, for patience, because we had to cut short this lecture. It's only a synoptic that I have given you. I would have loved to talk a little more, but anyway, because
many thanks.
The time
many
is
thanks.
I thank you profusely, my brother Professor Hamid Saab, my younger brother Farid Saab, and with great respect to Professor Musa, my great respect for him. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ratan, for your thoughtful reflections and the detailed to discussing a detailed scenario on civilizational dialogue. Now, with the permission of our chairperson, Professor Ahmed Musa, we would open the session for a brief question answer session, which will continue for 10 minutes. And after that, we would be having the presenting address, inshallah.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so we open the session. We open the floor for question and answer session.
Yes, please.
Yeah, please. So if you have any questions, you're welcome.
I would be happy because criticism grows knowledge.
Yes.
That's what teacher taught me 20 years back.
We have a question from Mir Muzaffar. Wanted to ask any question. So, Brother Mir Muzaffar, you're welcome. Can you unmute your mic? Please, you can ask your question.
Good evening, everyone. It was really a thoughtful reflections and intricacies of this civilization dialogue. I have a simple question to our resource person. What is the prospect and procedure of this civilizational dialogue in this new right-wing era, particularly from Western Europe to Central Asia to West Asia, even South Asia?
Yes. My opinion is there's no doubt that in the whole world we do find, particularly in Western world or even India also, obviously, that this question of radicalization, right wing, what we call, some people may call it, that their point of view is correct, but we certainly characterize it on the basis of our history and knowledge and so on. So my point is that we must raise questions because people should try to have patience to listen. Whether it is right wing or left wing, unless we raise questions and put before them and make them habitual of listening to us. Because silence is not answer to these things. Raising question and making people aware about things is the best solution before such circumstances. When such circumstances sort of overwhelm a particular society, we must remind them that in history, there is something great also that the civilization has produced. Why not we learn from those experiences instead of, characterizing everything as this, that, and so on. So we should raise questions because we should have the power of conviction. We should raise questions and make people aware. Let's also, because when questions also will reach to an extent that they will overwhelm. Raising question itself is also a sharing of knowledge. Because when we only listen to the other viewpoint, whether right or anything, when we are listening to them, we are giving, our silence is giving acceptance that perhaps there is no other knowledge system. But when we counter that with there is a knowledge here, there is something different here, I think that's the only solution. We must not forget, we should not lose patience. Things would go correct sometimes when we certainly raise questions.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much. Any other question?
Well,
any other question? Please raise your hand from the participants.
Brother Bakar has some question. Please go ahead.
Brother Bakar. I think Brother Bakar already asked question.
No,
any other?
Muted. He's muted, perhaps. I think he's muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks.
Okay,
all right. I just want to find out this question. If a major civilization have an institutionalized dialogue instead of congress, will be modern concept like nation state, border and sovereignty even exist today? That's my first. My last question, what is the colonial encounter have been framed as a mutual civilization exchange rather than hierarchy mission? How different will be global inequality look today? Thank you.
You see, let me tell you about the first question first. Could somebody repeat it also? Can you repeat this question, Farid?
No, man, I can repeat the question. It's okay.
Okay.
My first
there's
question
little audio.
If major civilization had institutionalized dialogue instead of conquest, will be modern concept like nation state, border, and sovereignty will even exist today? That's the first question. Second,
yes, first 1 second. The civilization would, it gets transformed over a period of time. We had ancient state, we had dialogue even that point of time. We had medieval state, we had dialogue at that point of time. We have modern state, it is at this point of time that with modernity and with colonialism that this domination came and scope for dialogue was left less. And we were treated unequal in that kind of system. The nation state, even if the nation state is there, different, for example, we have transition from feudalism to capitalism. We have transition from primitive to feudal. But dialogue has existed. If you look at the past, look at our interaction was, even though there were conquests, but our interaction was also far more wider. There's no doubt about it so far as the dialogue was concerned. It was far more wider at that point of time. Can you imagine that large number of Indians and Kashmiris went to China and spread Buddhism? Because Chinese felt that there was something better in their civilization, when we talk of compassion of Buddhism and so on. And nation state never came, but we find when modernity, sort of the dawn of modernity took place, things changed. Things changed for worse, not for better. Because the scope for dialogue was completely shelved. Second question, yeah.
Right. My second question is regarding about the what is colonial encounter have been framed as a mutual civilization exchange, okay, and rather than hierarchy mission. How different will be global inequality look today?
You see, global inequality also has, I would say, there are regional, sort of diversities in global inequality. When you talk in terms of, as I said, that colonial masters never treated any other civilization equal and modern, any other civilization meritorious and enlightened as the Western, so far as the colonialism is concerned. Therefore, when you look at suppose this value system regionally, regional modernities, for example, or global poverty, as you said, global, when you look at globally, in fact, our poverty in India is different than the poverty in West. Because our poverty may be, expecting welfare measures, for example. Our poverty will may be looking for the bread. We may be looking for clothing, but British may be looking for something else because their problem of bread may not be there, problem of clothing would not be there. Global problems are different. For example, look at the Palestine, for example. Their poverty at the moment is looking, they want shelter, which the world is completely silent and blind, I would say. They want simple shelter. Their poverty is different than, we don't have problems of shelter in India, we don't have problems of shelter in West. If you look at the problems of poverty also differ globally. The consequences and problems, the reasons are the causes of poverty also they differ globally, in fact.
I just want to share one point just now you raised. Okay,
yes,
when you mentioned about the history or the poverty, but there will be a question will be arising. What is the history where it's written collectively by multiple civilization instead of victory? How to identify and a memory change on this?
You see, we have, for example, there are in history also we have to take into consideration, look at, I would give you a very simple example. If you go to Greco-Roman tradition, how did history writing emanate, for example. If you go to Greco-Roman tradition, there was a dateless past. There was completely, even in, Arab world also, in Baghdad particularly, at that Mesopotamian civilization, that time when Greco-Romans were talking in terms of history, there was a dateless past. There was no proof. It was all supernatural things only were recorded by them as birth in history. But you find that it took transformation took place. Herbert Butterfield, others intervened. The same Western civilization began to change its opinion. And then ultimately the age of reason was born. They looked for factors, they dated the past. Therefore, look at India, for example. 1947. What was India's history written? We had a textbook by James Mill. We had a textbook by Wilson. We had a couple of more books by some of the Westerners, others were all reports. That was Indian history. And then we changed it. We had colonial historiography writers. We had Marxist historiography writers. We have traditionalists. We have so many others. And imagine, despite all this development and reason, we landed in an era where history is also being shelved today. That history is also being questioned. The reason is being questioned today. This is also a transformation in India, though transformation for worse, not for better. So therefore, if you have to, we should stick to widen our field of inquiry, widen our field of facts, widen our field of analysis. Because, you may collect a truckload of materials for writing history, for example. But what matters not only the truckload of materials that you have collected, what matters ultimately is what you generalize out of that material. What you give to public for consumption out of that. So therefore, our own understanding of historical circumstances is also very important in that method for providing better history, better sense of history for future generations.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Are we able to entertain one more question from Ome Amara?
Oh yes, no problem. No problem at all. I like questions because they help me to understand my own, understanding.
Our one participant, Ome Amara, asks in chat box, based on history, do you think civilizational dialogue today is strong enough to address current global conflicts, or does it need a new approach?
My friend, I would say that there is no civilizational dialogue today. The saddest part is that all of us watched how those children were eating grass in Palestine. It hurts my heart even today. Where is the civilizational dialogue? There's no civilizational dialogue at the moment. We have only, I often say, democracy in most of the, we say American democracy, Indian democracy, democracy in the world has fatigued. We have world imperialism gone mad. There's no control. The international institutions, I say today, for example, what is UN doing about it? What are the international organizations doing about it? Nothing. Because the dominant countries, the most powerful countries have become arrogant. They want trade and they want your subjection. They do not want your views. They are not bothered about your existence. They want to enrich themselves on items that are available to you. They want to proliferate market by making you purchase their goods. And they want economic, strategic, political control of different societies. There is no question of co-equals. There is no question of existence. There is no question of plurality. It is only a relationship of dominance and subordination, subjection. That is what world is today obsessed with.
Thank you so much, Prof.
There is one question. Excuse me. There is one question from Brother Adi Jaja. Lukman.
Yes.
Lukman, welcome.
Yes, please. You can have as many questions, no problem at all. I'll be really delighted.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
I think Brother Adedito Lukman is muted. Could you unmute your mic? Brother Adedito Lukman. Okay, welcome.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yeah.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Go ahead.
Walaikum salam. Walaikum.
I'm calling from. I'm from Nigeria.
Yes, please. Pleasure.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much. So, yeah, thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay.
I'm with you fully.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I think we may conclude the question answer session now. And
We have one
invite
question, please.
one
Oh,
question.
yes, Irfan has.
Okay,
Irfan
Brother
has some
Irfan,
question.
welcome.
Good evening, all of you. Actually, my question may seem silly, but I simply could not resist to ask you, what is the main reason of
Yeah.
these clashes between the civilizations? Where does actually these ideas come from? Is it simply the scientific superiority, or the people were having enough money at the initial stage, and though they simply were trying to impose their ideologies or narratives on others? Secondly, if there's a debate between, or if there is a discussion or some sort of dialogue between the two ideologies or different narratives, what is the raw to evaluate?
What is that?
Raw to evaluate. We are to agree or we are to disagree. Who is going to judge that we should these should be the common things, and these are the points of disagreements, and where we can simply continue our discussion?
You see, my point is that dialogue at the moment does not exist. You know, let me give an example. Dialogue was, for example, when India and Pakistan had a strained relationship. Some of my friends and acquaintances, they had moved a, society called India-Pakistan People's Forum for Peace and Democracy. The government had nothing to do with it. It was people's initiative. People would go talk to common people there and talk to common people this side. And it did fetch some good results for the time being at that point of time. Today, when we say where from these ideas of coming, are they coming from, say, money, power, or as you said, scientific superiority? No. This is starvation for dominance. If you look at politically, the neighbor's duty is also to destabilize his neighbor politically between the two countries. And this tendency has been there from the day people were in various tribes. There were intra-tribal conflicts when the civilizations were not there, when primitive life was there. Even that time there were conflicts from that day onwards. But then it was also carried forward because there was interaction, there was dependence. When civilizations grew, then we find, particularly for medieval period, we find that there was immense amount of scope for dialogue, and dialogue between the civilizations was taking place. There's no doubt about it. Dialogue, when we say civilizational dialogue, as I said, that necessarily does not mean that there will be always goody-goody atmosphere. There will be trouble between the powers. But yet the civilizational dialogue should go on. But what is happening? I may be prepared to go for civilizational dialogue with the West, but West should be prepared. West is not prepared. They are not prepared because they want to superimpose their dominance. That is the problem.
In other words, we can
so
say,
as a result of this starvation for dominance, there's a suspicion, there's a conflict, there's a trustlessness between the countries.
Does it lead
and there
us
are varied
back to
factors that have also, there are varied factors also that have led to this, apart from, particular, suppose I may not have done damage to America, but when we find that our West, they are not in a position to solve their problems, which they should have. So therefore they feel that they look at the people as other. Earlier also people were migrating, though not in so large numbers and all. And there was assimilation, there was incorporation. It's not today only that people have, there are lots of Kashmiris who got incorporated when Soviet Union became Soviet Union. And there are many of the Kashmiris who got completely assimilated into Chinese civilization and elements from Central Asia into Kashmir. That time nobody said he's the other. Professor Hamid Saab and our chairperson would allow me to say that, for example, look at the day Sheikh Abdullah was arrested. I quote this example because it's most contemporary. On 9th August 1953, we have more than 450 people coming from Kazakhstan to Kashmir and staying near a place called Kaksarai in Karamnagar. And Sheikh Abdullah went and talked to them and said, what's happening in Central Asia that morning and so on. And out of those 400 people, nearly 300 people or so went to Turkey and settled there. The 200 settled down in Kashmir. I mean, we never said they are not Kashmiris. They are taking pride in being a Kashmiri, for example. That was the tendency. That was the consequence of a civilizational dialogue, because we would accept the people. But today, we want, you are a Muslim, you have to be out. You are a Hindu, you have to be out. You are a Christian, you have to be out. This, we all Muslims, we all Christians, we all Hindus, these are post-colonial tendencies. So colonialism and capitalism has played havoc with, different countries, different nations, different civilizations. And as a result, there is no scope for dialogue. They don't entertain things like that. That's the worst part of it today.
So does
it mean that
it mean that it is somewhat deeply actually intrinsic in the human soul or in the human mind that somebody feels superior to others that does not pave way for dialogue and all this thing?
Dear Irfan, you're talking in terms of idealism, of ego, I would say. Don't mind. Because it is not a mystic tendency that they don't want it. It's not a spiritual thing that they don't want. There is a material background to it. Material background in the sense they want to protect their dominance in economy, in polity, in science, technology, in medicine, in political power. They want to be dominant.
That's what I actually said. So in other words, nowadays we can say it's the science and technological developments. You see, one of the physicists, Richard Feynman, once said that why are we going to provide scholarship for Indian or Pakistani students, because they are doing nothing in science. They are simply begging it. We are giving them the begging pots. Why should we do it?
So thank you so much, Brother Irfan. Also, because of time limitation, so we are
thank you, Dr. Farid,
including the question and answer session here. So I would like to invite our chairperson, presiding speaker, Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa, to offer reflections and contextual insights that further enrich today's discussion. Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa is a respected scholar, public intellectual, and civil society intellect from Malaysia. He is the founder and director of the Islamic Renaissance Front, an intellectual movement and think tank promoting reform, democracy, good governance, and human rights in Malaysia. He has been actively engaged in interfaith and intrafaith dialogue, particularly in Christian-Muslim and Shia-Sunni, the intrafaith discourses, and currently serves as an academic researcher at Monash University, Malaysia. So, Dr. Ahmed, you are welcome to chair the session.
Right. Thank you so much. Basically, it was a very good talk just now, and because of the limited time that we have, we're closing in 10 minutes time. So I'm just saying that, when we talk about civilizational dialogue, I think the most important thing is that to have humility. Without humility, there's not going to be any kind of dialogue at all. And the problem is that, like what this brother just now asked us about this right-wing politician and stuff like that. And I think it's a very important question, because basically he was saying that, when we have this kind of right-wing attitude, we can see this right-wing in America, in Europe, in India especially, and in many other parts of the world. It is going to be almost very little dialogue in between civilizations, and without having this important value that I mentioned just now about humility, I do not think that there's going to be any significant inter-civilizational dialogue at all. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing that I want to say about today, which is, we have to have this kind of ability to empathize with the other. And without that empathy, I do not think that, there's going to be any dialogue whatsoever. I think that's my input for the session that we have today. And I hope that, we can get some Professor Marazi just now. I think you haven't completed your talk. I think if you want to complete it, then you're welcome. Yeah.
Many thanks, Dr. Ahmed, for presiding this session. Now I would like to invite our President, Professor Marazi, sir. And so he will have some reflections and also the vote of thanks to close the session, because keeping in view the time, we have 10 minutes left. So hopefully, inshallah, we will conclude the session with our Professor vote of thanks. Welcome, Prof. Prof, you are muted. Could you unmute? Sorry. Unmute.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa. He's a top intellectual, mashallah. I know because we had a good interaction there in Malaysia when I was there. And mashallah, I have attended several of his lectures at different places, and he is well versed with modern realities and what is happening around the world, and especially in the South Asian context. I was expecting something more from his great self to enlighten us, but maybe in some other time we will have special lecture of him on the subject. That will be better appropriate for this, inshallah. So today we were just discussing a very important issue, that was civilizational dialogue, and Professor Ratan Hangloo. He is one of the topmost historians of, I should say, Asia. And mashallah, we had a very good interaction at JNU and other places as well. And his scholarship, so far as history is concerned, is very remarkable. And he brought some new dimensions about dialogue to fore. Especially, he talked about modern times when there is less scope of dialogue, rather no scope of dialogue at all, because people are trying to dominate. And as he said rightly, if there is no humility, as that was also endorsed by Professor Ahmed Farooq Musa, that dialogue needs humility, but there is arrogance. There is a lot of, I should say, they feel boastful about their power, their energy, and their forces. And for that reason, no dialogue is taking place at all. And there is deadlock. There is no dialogue in this sense. And so far as civilizational dialogue is concerned, so they want only one civilization. That is European civilization. Everything should be just patterned, after their way of life, norms and values and whatever they have. Whether we consider these values as values or not, that's not important. But they want to impose those values on us. And after globalization, now they have control on each and everything of ours. So in this way, but this was not the reality of earlier times. And we were listening from Professor Ratan Hangloo, that there had been dialogue in all times, whether it was feudal time, whether it was medieval time, or it was Muslim rule, or it was Mughal period. There was a great deal of dialogue going on at different parts of the world, even among Christians and Muslims, among Hindus and Muslims, among Buddhists and Hindus. And in this way, several theories came to fore, like Advaita Vedanta, Dvaita Vedanta, Vatul Wujud, and then we had, mysticism, and then we had Rishiism in Kashmir and other parts of the world. So in this way, this dialogue has stopped now. But does it mean that we should allow it to happen for all times to come? Have we any role in this process to begin or to restart this dialogue? I think that we have a role. Finally, these are the humans who shape the history. Historical determinism, although we believe sometimes because of Marxian influence, historical determinism is also there. Because according to Marx, history is the vehicle of revolutions. But humans have a role, because I may just invoke Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre. So that if you are not resisting, a person who wants to make you bonded, you have a bad faith. So we have to come out from this bad faith. And we can just play a very important role so far as intellectual level is concerned. Although Professor Hangloo has already discussed this thing, the dialogue is going on among the common people. But the powers, they are there. They are not allowing this dialogue at the higher level. The powers which matter, they don't allow this dialogue. And now they're creating problems. Otherwise, common people are in dialogue. Every day they are in dialogue in one way or the other. But if the intellectuals, scholars, and such type of poets and literary figures, they will also join hand, and they will become majority, and their voice can be also heard. I believe so, because we have to believe, we have to be optimistic for future. Otherwise, we are doomed. So in this way, but he was dealing with the historical aspect, was seeing where we have reached now in this dead end of history, I should say. And lost man, as there is no narrative now, there's no grand narrative. And as in postmodernism, there is no grand narrative now. And there's no meaning of culture, there's no meaning of anything else. It's absurd and types of absurd. But I feel that so far as Asia is concerned, Oriental world is concerned, we have a lot to share with the world. And we can give lessons even to the West about dialogue. We have been in dialogue, Samvad was there. I always say this now, it has to be the century of the Asia. It has to be the century of Orient. And now Orient has to rise. And we had dialogue always. We had Samvad. And for that reason, their theory has been clash of civilization. Our has been dialogue among civilizations. So this theory needs to be highlighted and it needs to be promoted in the academic institutions. And we can play a very important role in this aspect. So there can be said much about the subject, but because of the paucity of time, I'm conscious of that. And because of some miscommunication, so we could not continue like that. But I was very much impressed by the great lecture and insights of Professor Ratan Hangloo. And he has been always, inspiring us by his great wisdom. But today he inspired us more. And we are very, proud because he is son of the soil and he is from Kashmir, mashallah. And he is spreading the light to different parts of the world. And he has been doing that all along. And I am witness to that because we had the common teacher, Professor Muhammad Khan. So that light is going on, alhamdulillah. So this was the first double program of ours, and it started well. I am very thankful to all the participants, and especially Professor Dr. Ahmed Farooq Musa. And he just spared his time. I know how much busy he is. And he was in touch with us all these days when we started negotiating about the program. So his presence made a sense for us, and it was a great encouragement for us. By his presence, we were so much encouraged and we were honored. So we thank Professor Dr. Ahmed Farooq. And he's a Datu. Datu is just like sir. It's a great name in the context of Malaysia. And he is just like sir. And we always consider him as our, I should say, guide and our mentor. Thank you very much, Ahmed Farooq Musa, for your presence. And then I am very thankful to Professor Ratan Hangloo, and he also spared his time, although he's so busy, he had so many programs, but he, just gave us some time from his busy schedule, and he enlightened us by his very wise, I should say, advice as well as, knowledge and instructions. And he just led us to next phase, inshallah, when we'll be just dealing with different aspects of dialogue, inter-civilization dialogue, intercultural dialogue, inter-faith dialogue. And because we are not believing only in interfaith dialogue, we need inter-civilizational dialogue. Their faith may not count always. When we may have dialogue with those people who are not believers. And we are not bound only by faith and in these aspects always. As he rightly said, there can be dialogue among civilizations between Chinese and between Arab world. Although there is a lot of difference of faith and I should say denomination, but still dialogue is possible in this way. And when we talk about civilizational dialogue, it is broader in scope, and we want to touch those issues which are very important for us. So he has just opened the gate for us, and inshallah in future we'll be following his wisdom. And we are also very thankful to all the participants. Please, if you just...
Yeah, one point I very rightly, Professor Rafiawadi, my friend and brother, he said that even if we are not belonging to the same religion, you can all remember the greatest example in the world is of dialogue when Prophet addressed Muslims that go as far as China, so far as education is concerned. I would say the last point would be that we should all pray that there is somewhere the meeting of, the arrogant political power and humility of public. That humility of public should overwhelm arrogance of political power, then dialogue would be possible. Thank you. Please go ahead.
You're right, sir. Quite right. And I'm also thankful to Brother Eddie Jija. He has joined us from Nigeria. We were together in South Korea in that World Peace Summit. I remember that. So he's also a great social worker, and he's also involved in interreligious and interfaith. Yeah. And I'm also thankful to Dr. Nasim Gul and Mr. Irfan Ahmed and all brothers, Dr. and Safia Sabri. They have taken a lecture, and we were all enlightened by Professor Ratan. I am thankful to all of you for your presence and for making this program a very successful program. Although we had many other people who had just registered, but because of various reasons, maybe time zone differences and other things, they could not join. About 40 people had already registered themselves. But we hope that in future we will be having more and more people join their hands with us. With these words, I am thankful to all of you, and I hope that we will be, continuing this dialogical, journey, so that we reach to some conclusion and help this crisis. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Mr. Fareed,
Many
over to
thanks
you.
For your kind
Mr.
words,
Fareed.
Prof. Yes, Prof. Alhamdulillah, it was a nice session. And,
over to you.
I'm once again, yes, Prof.
Go ahead.
So we hope this session has enriched the understanding and the civilizational dialogue and its relevance in the contemporary world. Especially, I would like to repeat the quote as highlighted by Prof. Ratan Hangloo sahab, that civilizations civilizations do not evolve alone. So it has to be interaction, inter-civilization interaction between the civilizations to grow and develop. In fact, during my PhD thesis, which was specifically on globalization, I quoted more than 25 definitions on globalization, but the most common, which was that's the increasing interaction between the civilizations. And I highlighted the Quranic interpretation of the Surah Al-Hujurat was that where God says, "Oh mankind," to mankind. So mankind is comprised of different civilizations. Here is not a discussion about a specific religion, where God addresses mankind. Says, "Oh mankind, I have made you among different nations and tribes. لِتَعَارَفُوا in Arabic, so that you can know each other, you can interact with each other." And that was that time, in my humble understanding, the inter-civilizational dialogue. So that is how what I understood from this thoughtful lecture from Ratan Hangloo sahab, that civilizations do not evolve alone. Thank you so much once again, and all the participants who asked very important questions in this very significant and contemporary topic. So I would like to thank once again and look forward, inshallah, to your participation in your future programs. So I hope Prof. Ratan Hangloo, Datu Farooq Musa, inshallah, from Malaysia, and all dignitaries and professors, we will do hand-to-hand, shoulder-to-shoulder our work to contribute in this specific contemporary domain. Contemporary is a relevant domain, inshallah. So by this, I formally conclude today's session and say thank you and good night to all of you. Jazakallahu khair.
All the best.
Right. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.